Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my podcast, Ask Me Anything. I've gone through plenty of ups and downs in my life and have learned a lot along the way, but now that I've got a midlife crisis reinvention under my belt, I know it's never too late to learn something new. That's why on this podcast, I'm going to be talking to Kiwis from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. This week, my guest is one of our top chefs, Simon Gault. Simon opened his first restaurant, Bell House, at just 22 years old. Since then, he has been in charge of several of Auckland's finest, Euro, Gault's on Key, and more recently, Giraffe. We've seen him on our screens as a judge on MasterChef. Simon has shared his career and life to date in a book. It's called No Half Measures, and I am thrilled to have him with me today. I'm a bit of a fan. Simon, welcome in.
It's good to be here. Last time I saw you, I think I was doing a cooking demonstration and we got you cooking.
You did. You got me on stage. I loved it. I love cooking, so I am especially excited to have you here. 2 rules for my podcast. First is I'm allowed to ask you anything, but you don't have to answer, which is a good life lesson, I always think. And second, we don't do judgy. There's no judgment.
All right, bring it on.
Yeah, on anyone. Icebreaker questions. Favourite cheese?
Have to be a blue cheese.
Oh, I love a blue cheese.
A blue cheese, and the stinkier the better. Probably my all-time favourite would be Roquefort cheese. My second all-time favourite would be Gorgonzola Dolce. It's a sweet one, so it's sort of, some of it's sort of soft and creamy, and then the other part of it is hard, so it's like a layered cheese.
Can you get that in New Zealand?
You can occasionally,
okay.
Yeah,
right.
It's beautiful. But hey, New Zealand Kikarangi Blue has got to be something, we are so proud of. It's sensational blue cheese. We've got lots of great cheeses in New Zealand.
Favourite nut? I'm just asking all food questions. I love food.
Brazil nuts, because they're so good, and 2 Brazil nuts is your daily dose of selenium. So it's an easy way to up that ante.
Hazelnuts? They're one of my...
No, I'm not a fan of hazelnuts unless we make a homemade Nutella.
Okay, that's fair enough. And you've got a hazel, who we'll talk about later. Yeah. So that's a goodie. You must get asked this a lot. So one last meal, what would it be?
It would probably be spaghetti aglio olio con peperoncino. So that's spaghetti with garlic, extra virgin olive oil and chili. Incredibly simple. But when you cook spaghetti, the key is to get the water ratio right when you're cooking it and the salt in there. No oil. You do not need oil when you're cooking a spaghetti. And at the end, you just almost cook the spaghetti, and then it goes in with the garlic and the olive oil and the chili, and then you add the water, which is now starchy if you've got the ratio right, and you add the water into it, and it becomes a creamy pasta without any cream or butter.
So do you think I'm not putting enough water in my pasta? Because I do often cheat with the pot that's there.
No, you need lots of water.
Okay.
And it needs to be, a little bit salty.
Yeah, okay. All right, then I'm going to think about that. Favourite thing to bake?
I'm not really a baker.
No, doesn't do it for you.
I worked as a pastry chef in London years ago and became pretty good at profiteroles and puff pastry, which, seems to be a bit of a lost art, puff pastry now. So more that sort of thing as opposed to baking a cake.
That's absolutely fair. Right, now we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the health journey and advice from people on what you've done, and it's just fascinating reading the book, so I love it. The book's called No Half Measures, and I think aptly so. Let's talk about the love of flying. So your father was a pilot. Did you always get that buzz of being in the air?
Well, I always saw Dad dressing up in a uniform to go off and fly. He started out in the Air Force and latterly became an airline pilot. So I always thought that was pretty cool. And then I never forget somebody going home to Dad one day and saying, I went to a friend's from school's dad's workplace, and he had a bar in his office. And then I remember my dad saying, well, I've got a couple of bars in my office. And I always thought, just flying airplanes was just so cool. And then occasionally on my birthday, I would get taken for a flight in an airplane and tipped upside down. And I just absolutely loved it. I was obsessed with it. I collected airplane magazines. I think one of the first books I ever read was Reach for the Sky with Douglas Bader, who was a fighter ace in World War II. So I was always just loved airplanes. And then when I said, am I going to be a chef? Am I going to be a pilot? And, my dad talked me out of being a pilot because of, you're always reliant on a medical. And in hindsight, that was very good advice because I probably would have lost my medical a long time ago. So I went for the cooking career, but on the sideline, I went and learned how to fly sailplanes or gliders.
Yeah, I love the gliders story.
Yeah.
It must be so peaceful, is it?
Well, it's not really. Most people think gliders just go up and flutter down, but in actual fact, they're high-performance, heavy machines. And it's all about seeing how far you can go, how quickly you can go there and come back and land at the place that you took off at. To give you an idea of just how high performance these things are, a guy called Terry Delore took off from Omarama in the South Island in the morning, flew to Bluff, turned around and then landed at Drury in Auckland that evening. So he flew the whole length of the South Island and almost all the way up the North Island, landing at Drury in Auckland.
All on air and aerodynamics.
Yeah, so they're high-performance machines. So they're not super quiet inside because you've got wind noise.
Okay.
They're sleek. They're beautiful. It's like strapping a pair of overalls on and going and flying with the birds. There are no spectators. It's you against the elements, and it's a real challenge. How fast can you fly around that course? Can you actually complete it without landing in a paddock? The sun heats the ground and the wind blows against hills and things like that, and using all of those currents to fly. Anybody can learn how to fly. You can drive a car, you can fly a glider or an airplane, and gliding is a lot cheaper. So I started by learning how to fly gliders.
And it's not unlike performance level sailing, where they can see wind that I can't see, right? They can see the change in the air and the ocean, and so it sounds to me
very similar.
Yeah, I'm
very similar.
I'm very much a non-expert on this. So from my layman's perspective, yeah. Fascinating. Because you could have done either, really. You could have been a pilot and cooked as a hobby, and instead you've cooked and had the flying as a hobby.
Yeah, so I love cooking. I really love it, and I've done it for my life.
Yeah.
And on the sideline, I've flown all sorts of gliders, airplanes, World War II airplanes.
Awesome.
Flown them in air shows and things like that. So, I've really tried to climb the learning ladder. Still always learning in aviation and in cooking. But it's a great balance because aviation is a real discipline. And cooking is a bit more craziness, right?
Yeah. The first restaurant that you owned, 22 years old, I was thinking about it, I was thinking at it from two levels. I was like, oh my God, are you mad? That's so young and such a huge responsibility, and do you regret it? And then the other side going, well, God, there's nothing like being 22 and bulletproof and leaping in and having that kind of shizbar and going for it. I mean, looking back, how do you kind of see it?
I don't regret doing that. I wanted to own a restaurant. Yeah. That was my dream. I wanted to be a head chef. I love cooking and I wanted my own restaurant. Now, back then it was a lot easier to do. Now, borrowing money from the banks is a lot harder. I was fortunate. I had a fantastic apprenticeship with a boss that inspired me to save money, buy shares. So I was very lucky. The shares that I was advised to buy went up.
And that's Tony Astell that we're talking about.
Tony Astell, the guru. He's, the godfather of New Zealand cooking in many ways. And he inspired me to save money and go for my goal, go for my dream and go and get it.
I love that.
Yeah, and I was lucky that those shares went up, and I was also very lucky that I had a family that supported my dream. I remember when I left school at 16, friends' parents were saying, he should be going to university, he should be staying at school, he shouldn't be doing this. But my mum and dad supported me, and they could see from a young age I wanted to be in kitchens.
Yeah.
And, I don't have any regrets. I loved it. I had no idea what I was doing when I first opened that first restaurant, but I'd worked for some very talented people prior to that, from 16 to 22. And I just stole all their good ideas.
Yeah. And put them together, though, to make your own.
Yeah. And then you start developing your own style and your own way of inspiring people who work for you and trying to get peak performance out of them. And I tell you, I was terrible at it to start off with. I'd make Gordon Ramsay look like a pussy on some days because you're just so passionate and so cannot afford to put a bad meal out. I worked 3 years before I took a day off. We were closed Sundays, but I was in that kitchen every night and lunch. It was a hard yard. I lived it. I breathed it. I slept on the couch upstairs. I went to the rugby club occasionally to have a shower when I had time. I lived and breathed it, and I loved it, and I learned quickly. That's the thing, and you don't always get it right. And I think what I've learned over the years is accepting failure, accepting the bad things, learning from them really quickly, and thinking, how fast can I fix this? I need to fix it now, not tomorrow.
Yeah. So a couple of things I'd like to unpack in there. So one being around your own style of boss management in a kitchen. And you said in the book, you've had moments with where you'd rival Gordon Ramsay and you sound like, look, I wash dishes and I've had a pot thrown at me. Not from you, I'd like to say. But in the 80s, it wasn't quite clean enough and the chef hoisted it over and just missed my head. Particularly in the 80s, they quite fiery.
Well,
but different than now.
Yes, it is. Well, PC world, you can't do those sort of things anymore, and I don't think I've ever thrown a pot at anybody.
That's good. You have had a steak thrown at you, though.
I've had a steak thrown at me, yes, I have. And I learnt from it too. I never cut the steak the wrong size ever again. So it was actually a good lesson for me. But you don't get peak performance out of people by terrifying them.
No.
And it took me a while to learn that, and I embraced a mentor called Kevin Roberts, who became a fabulous friend of mine and helped me to learn how to get peak performance out of people, how to inspire them, to listen to them, to talk to them and really be a good boss and inquire about them and support them and teach them something every day.
Yeah, nice.
And hopefully they teach you something every day. And generally they do.
Yeah. And the second thing I was thinking while you were talking is about those tough times. And I'm not sure we've all got the work ethic that you had then. I mean, I tell the story of I cooked in a truck stop and I did the night shift because I could take my baby along and she slept in the pantry and the bosses weren't there and they wouldn't have cared anyway. And if she did wake up, there were wonderful truck drivers who missed their own families and they would feed her while I cooked them a feed, And they were some of the best times and some of the, like the lack of sleep and the juggling everything. But there was that kind of dig in and failure's not an option and you just got to do what you have to do. And we can talk about the bigger restaurants and you talk about that in the book as well. You must have gone from particularly that share market crash in the late 80s, looking out and going, crikey, I can barely see anyone sitting down, to then in the 90s and when you're in the big restaurants going, my goodness, there's so many people here, we can't cope. And there must have been a real dichotomy at times during your ownership of restaurants when you're trying to survive.
Yeah, I went from Bell House, which was my first restaurant. It was an old house built in 1851 with verandas and, it was quaint.
And how many would it seat, sorry?
About 50 to 56 people. Yeah. So, on a big night, we might turn a couple of tables over. We might do 70. I think the most we ever did was like 85, 90. So not a lot of people, but it was fine dining. We carved
You charge them to the max.
Yeah, I did.
Good.
Yeah, well,
Good.
Actually, I used to always be a little bit under what I thought was my competition, and everybody said I was expensive. And then one day I thought, you know what? They all think I'm expensive. Why don't I just be expensive? So I put the prices up. Everybody said the same thing, and I got a better result.
Good.
But I went from that small restaurant to getting a toilet block in town, and so many people said I was just crazy. It would never work. It was on the fishing village, and people are, you're nuts. And I remember saying to Kevin Roberts, what do you think? And he said, well, what are they going to call it? And I said, they're going to call it the viaduct. And we ended up, he came in as a partner with me in that business. And the Whitbread fleet arrived when we opened. And because I had a front door and I had all these doors, we'd made all these holes in this toilet block so you could see this water. And people just came in and sat down everywhere. And I think our biggest day was 800 people.
Wow, that's cool.
800 people. And we did a pretty average job of it, to be brutally honest, because I had no clue how to do 800 people, manage this situation of people just walking in and sitting down. So it was a very steep learning curve. It nearly sent me bust. We did the Whitbread fleet. We had a potload of cash after that, but then an article came out in a magazine that slated us, but of course it came out months after the Whitbread fleet had left, at which stage we'd sort of worked out how it all worked and changed things, and I put all the money back in to redo the restaurant so it was more appropriate for what we were trying to achieve, and we were on track. But that article back then, because back then people relied on these magazine restaurant reviews, it virtually sent me bust. I was so close to going under, to the extent that egg whites were getting used to make meringue roulades to sell to people, to cooking a burger on the side of the street at night. But we survived and we got through it and ended up winning lots of awards, and it was a tough journey, but boy, you learn fast.
Yeah, and that's the key to it. I'm desperate to get into the second part because I just think you've got some great advice for those that are listening in. But we can't finish this one without talking about Hazel. And she looks adorable. How old is she now?
She's 9. 9!
Yeah. Oh, God, I love that age. Yeah? So is she just inquisitive and chatty and adorable? And
just amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a single dad, so it's just me and her. I have a week on, week off, and we just have this brilliant dynamic going. I'm not her friend, I'm her dad, and there's never any problems, and it's just unbelievable. She puts a smile on my face every day.
I can totally relate to that, actually, because, you know, I was a young single mum, and of course everyone, because I was so young, everyone just thought I was going to be silly and that sort of thing, and I used to always think, I'm actually your mother and your father, and so that's who I have to be. I'm not your buddy. Now she's 35 and she's absolutely my best friend, you know, but it's a different dynamic. But I did feel that while raising her, that actually what you need most in this life is a parent, because you're going to make your friends, you know.
Yeah, and a focused parent. That's why I don't have a restaurant anymore, because I get one shot at being this dad.
Yeah.
I don't get a second chance, and I'm determined to get it right.
Yeah. And you say in the book that actually being a bit older when you had her was probably the best thing for you.
Oh, totally.
Do you believe that? Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in restaurants. I was married to restaurants.
Yeah.
I would have been terrible. So I'm so thankful for the fact that I'm a bit of an older dad.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'd love to meet her one day, but then I'm slightly obsessed with children because they just bring so much joy.
This one absolutely will.
I love that. We're going to take a bit of a break now, but when we come back, we're going to have a bit of a chat about the health journey and weight loss and how we look after ourselves. I've already picked up a lot of tips, and I think that it's something that's just so important. So come back shortly. We are going to focus now on your switch to prioritising your health, your weight loss journey, and the passion for healthier eating and a healthier lifestyle that comes with that, and how you're sharing it with everyone, which I think is what's really fascinating. I mean, you don't become overweight overnight, and I know this, right? So I'm talking from personal experience here, and we're doing the no judgy. So it's to try and help people out there that we know are going to be, you know, we know people are overweight and feeling self-conscious about it and not that healthy.
Well, there are millions of people out there who know that they're overweight and they don't want it that way. They want to change, but the problem is most of us can't change. And I was that person for sure. You know, I had a mum saying to me, hey, diabetes runs in our family, you're overweight. I would arrive at work in the morning and start tasting food, cooking food, nibble all day with people coming up, chef, can you taste this? Can you taste that? finishing late at night, sitting down for a few drinks, getting home, or sometimes on the way home thinking, I haven't even really eaten dinner, so you stop. And back in the day, you'd get a Georgie pie or on the way home, or the first thing you do when you walked in the door is open the fridge door. What have I got? And it's now sort of 1:30 in the morning.
Wow, yeah.
So often you'd have something to eat and go to bed on a full stomach or having eaten, and then you get up and do it all again the next day. And progressively over a period of time, I got to be really obese, and I knew I was overweight, and eventually I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but they gave me drugs.
Yeah.
Drugs fix things, right? And the specialist and the doctor was saying to me, you need to lose weight. Then they offered me this one day, kept going back, you need to lose weight. And of course I was taking the drugs, so I really didn't do anything. Carried on. I wasn't eating bad food. I was just grazing all day. So cut a long story short, finally I woke up and thought, and this was when my daughter was 1, and I'm being told by a new doctor who I went to school with, do you want to walk down the aisle with your daughter?
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful, eh?
And that was the wake-up call that I needed. And I went home that day and I started Googling reverse diabetes. And it didn't take me long to discover there was no silver bullet. So I went on a massive mission.
Okay, and let's get to that because that's where we really want to. But there's so much of that psychology as the weight goes on, and I just think for people out there struggling, I know for me, I used to look sometimes and you'd see a skinny person eating a burger and chips, and I'd think, well, if they can eat a burger and chips and be skinny, I can eat a burger and chips and be skinny. Difference is I did that 3 times a day and they did it probably once a fortnight. Right? And I always say it's nobody's fault but my own, but I got to a point, particularly when I was in Parliament and I was in very senior roles, that food was my reward.
Yeah.
Right? Anything I wanted. I worked damn hard. If I want to eat bloody sweet and sour pork, I'll eat sweet and sour pork. And as I say, the problem is I was doing that breakfast, lunch and dinner. Actually, I was eating too much of the wrong food. There's no other two sort of ways to put it, and lying to myself about it. Right, so it wasn't until I sort of stopped and looked back that I saw that every day was unhealthy. It wasn't like it was like it is now. It's probably more like 5.5 days of being quite good, and then the odd one day a week where it's just like, oh God, better get back on track again tomorrow. So that psychology is quite interesting, what we tell ourselves, isn't it? And you touched on even, gosh, I haven't eaten today. I'll stop and get a pie at 1 a.m.
And some of us have genes that have the voice that says, you're full. And some of us have genes that go, you're full. And you hear that voice.
Yeah, you talk about that. That's fascinating. You're right.
And when you love something and you're eating it, and generally people that are a little bit bigger, they love food, right? And they're enjoying it. They're not eating for fuel. They're eating because they're loving it. But there's that voice in your head that says you've had enough, in a loud voice or a very quiet voice. And eventually it becomes a problem, right? And the thing is that we're eating very differently from what they were in New Zealand 40 years ago, because our grandparents wouldn't recognise half the food in supermarkets now. Back then, people were growing a lot more of their own food and they were pickling it so that in summer they could eat what they'd grown in winter and vice versa. Yeah. So we were getting natural prebiotics and probiotics into our body for this gut health that we've got. But, if I was going to sum up what our problem is that most supermarket trolleys are full of highly processed and refined food. And why do they put preservatives in these things? They put preservatives in because they need to extend the shelf life.
Yeah.
They want it to sit in the fridge longer or on the shelf longer. They want it to last longer. And what do those preservatives do? They kill bacteria so that the food can't go off. And then we eat that food and those preservatives don't go, oh, Paula's just eaten this, Simon's just eaten this, we'll stop working. Actually, they keep working inside us.
Okay.
And they keep killing bacteria. So we're cooking less and eating all this highly refined and processed food. Most of our trolleys out of the supermarket are full of that. We're buying less and less stuff that doesn't need a label. And those things are getting more and more expensive, which funnels us into all this other stuff. You know, like an apple doesn't need a label. A head of broccoli doesn't need a label. Corn doesn't need a label. But once it's turned into cream corn in a can, it does.
Yeah.
And once it's turned into a corn chip, even further processed, that's when all those preservatives and bad fats are in there. And that's where we're going wrong. We need to get back to cooking. And I'm very aware of this now because I went on that journey.
So touch me on that. So you, as you say, you sort of got to that point where you went, holy cow, yes, I do want to see Hazel. Yeah, I do want to be there in 20, 30 years, whatever it is. So I'm going to have to change. And so you must have known a lot about food, but then you went on this journey of discovering all that you've just been talking about.
One of the first things I was asked to do was to write a list down of all my priorities in life. And of course, right at the top was family.
Yeah.
And then number 2 was work. And then all these things went down. Then I was asked to do a pie chart of how I was allocating my time every day. And that was alarming when I looked at it to see that most of my pie chart was work and very little of it was family. And then the woman that was doing this with me said to me, Simon, you don't even have health on your list. I didn't even write health. It didn't even occur to me, as stupid as that sounds, and I was, without my health, I don't have the time for family. I don't have the time for work and all of those other things. So I needed to reprioritize and learn how to do that and start eating in windows. We've got a fridge and freezer inside us, right? Just like we do in our kitchen. And when we fill the fridge up at home, it's full. So we start putting stuff in the freezer. Well, our body does the same thing. We fill the fridge up, and then once it's full, we start storing it in the freezer. But we convert that fuel food that we've eaten to fat, and we store it as fat. So our freezer is visible. We can see it on our bum, our tummies, our arms. So if we start eating in an 8-hour window, that leaves 16 hours of the day when we're not eating, when we're fasting. And half of it, hopefully, we're asleep, right? So now we can empty the fridge out during the day and then we start going, the fridge is empty, let's get into the freezer. So we start pulling the reserves out and we convert it back to fuel. And we burn it as energy and donate it to the atmosphere, and hence we lose weight.
It was quite funny when I was overweight, and particularly in the big job, I was terrified of being hungry because then I thought I couldn't think properly. Which is wrong. Okay, we should be very clear. That is incorrect, but that was my psychology. So what my thing is, and what I've trained myself, is actually being hungry means that literally my little munches in my body are going in and eating my fat. So being hungry is a good thing. Not a bad thing.
It's okay to feel hungry. The most important thing is water. As a nation, most of us are dehydrated and have no clue. We should be drinking 2 litres of water a day minimum, preferably before 2 o'clock, so you're not getting into bed and having to get up all night. Sleep is just hugely important. We're quite happy to take our car and check it in for a service and get the oil changed and pump the tyres up. Maybe we need a new tyre. Whilst we sleep, that's checking our vehicle that we live in for a service. Everybody goes to work whilst we're sleeping, all the men and women, and start repairing things on our body. So if we don't get that 7 to 8 hours sleep, it's not enough to get you ready for the next day. And the damage we're doing to ourselves by not sleeping 7 to 8 hours is immeasurable. And it's a preparation before we go to bed, like blue light tricks our eyes into thinking it's daytime, but they communicate with our brain and say, don't go to sleep, it's late. It's time to work because you've been surfing your phone in bed or watching TV or on an iPad, that's blue light. We need to get back to the old days when there weren't TVs and we had a game of cards, or we actually talked to one another, a couple of hours before we go to bed, and dimming lights down. If we can get that 7 to 8 hours sleep, things like dementia and Alzheimer's, we're pushing all of that further away from us. 2 hours before you're going to bed, dimming whatever lights you can possible. Start looking at some foods that are better for sleep. Foods with tryptophan in, like eggs. Most people have eggs for breakfast, but eggs are brilliant for dinner.
Yeah.
There's a study done that 2 kiwi fruit an hour before bed will promote a better and more restful sleep. There's lots of foods out there that can help. A lot of people are magnesium deficient, and that will cause poor sleep. And how can we up magnesium without supplements and things? If you could have a smoothie at some stage during the day and get 3 tablespoons of hemp hearts in there, which is not going to get you stoned. They're not that sort of thing. They're just the superfood of magnesium. It would be almost your daily dose of magnesium. And improved magnesium levels, boom, improve sleep.
Okay.
I didn't mean this to be a health lesson, sorry.
No, it is. We're giving advice. It's called Ask Me Anything, and we're giving people advice, and I'm learning something because we have spent a bit of time on sleep. So if I could change one thing tomorrow for the good of my health, your recommendation would be?
Cut out processed foods.
Wow.
Highly processed foods. Turn them into a treat. Everything we need to do, 80% of it needs to be healthy. We can have 20%, we're a little bit naughty. But if we can be cutting out all those refined and processed foods, it make a massive difference.
Yeah. I'm pretty good at it because I love cooking. I cook every night.
And olive oil, tomatoes,
Yum.
garlic, turmeric.
You grow your own tomatoes, don't you?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes.
I was just in the, I was
year.
lucky enough to be in the islands, and my God, they have the most beautiful tomatoes, and I hadn't tasted one like that here for a few months. Yeah, it was amazing. Didn't look as sexy, and it tasted 100 times better than anything.
And we don't eat tomatoes. Everybody knows they're healthy, right? And they're full of lycopene and help fight cancer and all of those sort of things. But the average Kiwi consumes about 8 kilos of tomatoes a year. But in the Mediterranean, where they have half the amount of heart disease, 30% less cancer, 1/9 the amount of diabetes, dementia and Alzheimer's are virtually non-existent compared to what it is here, they're consuming 40 kilos of tomatoes a year.
Yeah, wow.
That's a massive difference. The average Kiwi is consuming about 200 mils of olive oil, full of antioxidants and polyphenols and all of these things that are fantastic for our health. 200 mils is the average here. Over there, 25 litres per person.
It's massive.
So it's about including good fats.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scientific evidence of trans fats, and, people that, I don't know about you when you were younger, but they cook the bacon and then you save the bacon fat and then you fry the eggs in them the next morning. There is so much evidence to show that is just killing us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying bacon's off the menu, but bacon, find a good bacon.
Really?
Find a bacon that hasn't had added sugar. Find a bacon that is not full of lots of preservatives.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Okay. We're coming out of winter now, and certainly in my household we've gone to the salads and much more of the fresh vegetables, and we eat raw, and I love it, right? And piece of meat, and we're good, we're away. But during winter I cook a lot of casseroles and a lot of soups, to try and get vegetables in my stepchildren and my grandchildren, because that's how I sneak them in. So is that all right that I'm really cooking them? Because I feed my parents and that as well, but there's something I can make in bulk, you see. So I just get whatever vegetables, I just grate them, I get them in there, getting them more used to eating good chunky bits of it. But, I used to just try and sneak them all in.
It's genius. And if I say Turkish food, Greek food, Spanish food, Italian food, you think good things, right? We need to focus to try and cook more like they do. So steak and 3 vegetables is a bit of a luxury meal, right? But what about having, your salad or your vegetable as a course beforehand, and then having a piece of meat that is beautifully cooked, seasoned, maybe a little sauce with it, and you have that as a separate dish. And if we can reduce the number of carbs, rice, for example, it's cheap and a lot of people are including it in their meals. Your body converts 1 cup of cooked rice to 12 teaspoons of glucose. 12 teaspoons of glucose. That is sugar. That's a lot of sugar. I mean, I'm not telling anybody anything new by saying that sugar's the devil, right?
Yeah.
Everything in moderation. But, if we can cut out the carbs and things and just have a beautiful piece of steak.
Yeah.
Get a little bit of miso and a little bit of chili and chop it up, a bit of water and some oil and mix it up, and suddenly you've got a lovely dressing. All things that are staples, not expensive, and no more than 350 grams of meat a week.
Yeah. So you look great. How do you feel?
Good. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm naughty as well. I love ice cream.
Yeah.
I love all those things, but 80% of the time I'm really good. And I know that I have a goal weight, and once I'm at that goal weight, I call it maintenance. So like I'm on maintenance, and if I creep up a bit, I need to pull my finger out and do a little bit harder on the things that I know and teach on the 4 Wheels of Health course.
I weigh myself once a week, but as it starts sneaking up, I'm religious and then pulling it back. And someone said to me the other day, you're just actually getting a bit paranoid. And I went, well, I didn't get 50 kgs overweight overnight. It was from putting on two, right? So when I get to 4, I'm like, right, take that 3 off. And this is where I should make sure that I'm absolutely being honest with everyone out there, and that my weight loss journey was kick-started with weight loss surgery. So, I had a gastric bypass. And for me, Simon, it was not dissimilar. I didn't care. I was tripping along. I was uncomfortable. I didn't love it, but you know what I mean? Love yourself and get on with it. And then one day I had very sore knees, and it turned out it was arthritis. And then the surgeon said to me, your heart's great. There's nothing wrong with you. You're actually going to live a long life. How's it going to be in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Because you're heading there really soon.
Those are the shocks that you need,
And
right?
that was my shock. I was just like, oh, God. Because, to be honest, I've been completely terrible to myself. So I thought, I'll die before I'm 50. And then as I started getting closer, I thought, I think I've got another 30 or 40 years in me. That doesn't sound as much.
And in a wheelchair, it's not a lot of fun,
That doesn't sound much fun.
Yeah.
And literally, I haven't had to have surgery yet. I will have to. But he said for every 10 kgs, I'm going to give you 5 years.
Yeah.
That was hugely motivational for me and made me think about my health. And now I have to watch what I eat. But just my other little thing I'd say in reinforcing of what you said earlier was definitely the voice in my head didn't scream, you're full, stop eating. I could barely hear a whisper, but what the operation did for me did exactly that. Right, I had no choice.
And that's what
it made me.
Some of us need that, right? And you get the people who go, just stop putting things in your mouth. They have completely different genes. They don't understand. They will never be supportive. And God help if they have a partner or a friend who's overweight, because those people are just, in my book, a pain in the ass, because they just do not understand. They never will. And they'll never be supportive.
I had a dad like that, and I said to him, every time you put me down because of my weight, do you know that I go and eat a pizza?
Yeah.
Because you make me feel so stink about myself.
Yeah.
And he just didn't get it, right? He's not a bad person. He just, no comprehension.
They don't understand. And too often we tell people all the bad things. You see a kid smoking, you shouldn't smoke, you'll die of cancer. You want to lose weight, otherwise you'll have heart disease or possibly a stroke. It's like we've got to reverse the roles a little bit and tell people the benefits of how they're going to do. And people like getting a gold star at school, right? They like getting a certificate. And kids love rewards. When adults need to do the same thing, reward each other as we make little milestones. Understand we'll fall off the bandwagon and tomorrow is another day to start again. Not next week, tomorrow. And have support. Enlisting family support and friends to support people on that journey, because too often we look in the mirror and we see somebody else that we're not. Sometimes we don't realise just quite how big we are. And it's that evaluation and starting that journey, having the support and accepting failure.
Yeah. And I suppose my message, since we're being nice and positive, is I would say to people, if you put food in front of me now and I have a choice between a beautiful piece of cheese and some salmon and fresh tomatoes that I just know are going to absolutely buzz out my senses and I'm going to enjoy, because I love food, right? And I'm going to totally enjoy it and it's better for me as opposed to the burger and fries or the fatty food that's sitting there that I know has all been processed. I get more joy out of eating food now than I ever have in my life.
And that's just fantastic. And that's music to people's ears, isn't it? You don't have to do a diet of twigs and berries. Diets do not work. Diets, people lose weight, they gain it back, generally more. It's about what you eat. You know, a beautiful piece of salmon full of omegas. We should be eating an oily fish 3 times a week for our heart health. And what is more luxurious than a piece of salmon or a piece of oily fish? And there's no such thing if it's too expensive. You can buy a can of sardines at the supermarket or a can of tuna that is minimally processed and okay, so long as you don't buy the one with added sugar. It's all achievable.
It is. And a joy. So, my message is it's not easy. And you've said it's not easy. There's no quick fix to this, but it is, it's pretty exciting. Okay. We have to get going because you and I could talk for hours. I've already worked that out. Simon, we're going to turn the tables now. You can ask me anything.
Okay, well, I'm a restaurant guy. Do you tip in restaurants? And if you do, why and why should people? And if you don't, why and why should people not?
Okay, so I absolutely tip and I believe that they should. I was recently in the islands, as I said, and I definitely tipped. I actually tipped more there than I do in New Zealand, which is interesting in itself. And it's funny that you should ask that, Simon, because when I was a Minister of Tourism, I publicly said that I felt that we should look at tipping, and it was so controversial. I mean, I got hate letters. I got people abusing me. There was literally a Twitter war on people that had served me in restaurants, half of who thought I was absolutely terrific and half of who then literally went, you get a cackle on your 3rd glass of wine and you and your girlfriends were horrible that night. And so I just swore I'd never go into that again because it just made me, it was honestly a little bit traumatic as to how sensitive people were.
So probably a lot of your listeners out here are going, we don't need to tip, shouldn't tip in New Zealand. That's what they do in America. You should pay your staff more. What do you say to those people? I
say that I believe that people are paid fairly in New Zealand and I always want to see them getting more. But I have been a waitress, I've been a kitchen hand, I've been a cook at the truck stop, and actually people rewarding the extra service or perhaps the more love and care that I put into serving them, because I do like service. You know what I mean? I like being someone that gives service. It just gave me a bounce. The money was great, but actually someone appreciating me for the extra I gave them made me better at my job.
People love rewards, right?
Yeah.
And we reward for success and excellence.
Yeah.
Not for things that don't go well. It's this PC world where there's never a winner, but there should be winners, right?
Yeah. I know this makes me sound so bloody, at myself, but I was sitting there having a massage the other week and it was one of the best I'd had. And as I was going, my God, this woman is amazing. And then I thought, I bet she's not on a very high wage. I'm actually paying quite a lot for it because I'm in a resort, and I gave her an extra $30 to be really blunt with you, which is probably a very good tip.
Yeah.
But I just absolutely wanted her to have that recognition that she had made me feel so good about myself, and I was so grateful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of waiters and restaurant people loving you. And probably a few people out there not wanting to talk to me again for raising it.
Yeah, and screaming and going, you should just pay people more and we're not American. And we all know the
Well, if they're happy to pay $50 for a main course, we probably can.
Yeah. Exactly. Final segment is Zip It, Sweetie. So this is when we get to gripe about something that's happened to us or that's someone that might have brassed us off a bit in the week, and we say Zip It, Sweetie to it. Mine is, and I've touched on this in the podcast before, but I've still got scammers using my image and an absolute BS story about how I lost my weight, and they're selling them this Vita Keto Green powder, and people are getting scammed by it still, and it's been about 2.5 months. Trust me, I keep getting it shut down. They just start up again. It's because people are buying it, right? That there's money in it for them. I've got private investigators. I've got lawyers on it. I've got to say Facebook have actually been really helpful. But man, it's awful, and I really feel awful for those people out there that are getting scammed by it.
They're everywhere, these scams, aren't they? That's, I've been catfished on Instagram, Facebook. I had one lady ring me at the restaurant one night who was from Spain, and I spoke to her and she said, I've been dating you online now for months and I've just discovered another site. You seem to be a different person. And it was a religious dating site. And they had photos of me. They had photos of my daughter. They'd taken all the photos off my social media. And she shelled out $5,000 to me. That wasn't me. And I've had that twice now with people. And it just pisses me off. And I went to the police. There's nothing they can do about it. They haven't taken the money from you. So
yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today, Simon. It has been so great to talk. People, you can find his book, No Half Measures, in stores now. Where else can they find you? He gave me a wonderful grater that I'm excited about. So you've got your products out there. You've got Gault's Deli, website, social.
I'm opening Gault's Kitchen in St John's in Auckland. It's going to be like walking into a massive domestic kitchen that's a shop, and it's all about coming and tasting before you buy. I'm going to do corporate team building, cooking classes, but it's a shop, and I'm working on that. We're building it at the moment.
I love that. And that's a wrap on another episode of Ask Me Anything. You, of course, can get in touch with me by emailing paula.bennett@nzherald.co.nz. Feel free to send me through your questions for the podcast or any thoughts you have. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.